But cool, we're recording now too. So I can go back and cut it if I need it. So I'm trying to get some little shines of hair, but I want most of this to be black so that it really stands out differently than the texture of the fur. Just keep building on top of each other. You can see how when it gets small like this, you start getting all these little fine details of hair, they start to look like the same fine details as the fur. So that's why I'm trying to limit how many of those I have, particularly right in this area, just so that it stays clear to read and understand. As I get up here, I'll probably create more of those. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but that's how I roll. So you learn how to do different techniques with different um, mediums. You might have you might be using digital, techniques, but the first thing you got to try and figure out when you're working digitally is how do you make a nice, smooth, thick to thin line? Um, because if you don't, and if all you can do is like make sort of the micron lines, then things are going to feel, really flat. I'm going to try to avoid that. There we go. That's looking good. So because my hand naturally flows this direction, I'm going to constantly keep turning the page to try and keep that line as smooth as possible. If you try to make lines that where your fingers are arcing like this direction rather than this direction, you're going to end up with a lot more wobbly lines. So for me, this is a natural movement, right? So that makes sense. Here in a second, I'm going to switch to a micron pen and do some more rigid lines. You want to be mindful of like the hair flow, like how's it naturally flowing on the head. You don't just want to like start shading in one direction because that's what's going to make it look real is if you have these lines flowing in the direction that hair would naturally go. Think about, where it's going to part, that kind of thing. Another thing I want to point out is, and I've pointed this out to some students before, but the separation between the edge of the hair and then there's a little white area and then there's black inside. That gives you an area to drop in a little highlight or a little color to the piece. Whereas if you just shade it in all black, there's not anything left to do. So it gives you a few more options. Okay, so you can see by adding that black in, it has a nice, powerful draw to your eye right in this area. That's what you want people to look at first is the face. All right, so I'm going to switch pens now. I think this is the one. Let's see. Yep, I think this is it. Okay, so this is a little little trick. I'm going to use this Micron pen. Normally, a Micron pen leaves a pretty rigid line, but this particular Micron pen, this is a 01, and it's still got a lot of liquid left in it. The tip of it, whether at one point I pushed down really hard on it or something, it's the tip of it's sort of angled, pressing on it too hard. I doubt you can see that. Let's see. Oh, yeah, there's a little bit. Oh, right. Nope, can't do it. Anyway, so what that's going to do is it's going to allow me to sort of whip the pen from a thick to thin line, which is how I made all of these little scale lines. So I start on the thick end and I whip it towards this direction I want to go to the thin line. Okay, and you can do that with a brush pen. I did some of them with a brush pen, some of these thicker ones here. But with this pen being bent like that, it really allows me to add a lot more flavor to the line, and that's kind of what you're looking for as a line artist. You can see there, it's the line I just made. You can see how it's got a nice thick to thin line. So if you do everything with a solid line, which you can certainly do, it's just going to give it a very rigid feel. It's going to feel more like a Disney cartoon, especially if you put those lines on characters. Because if you think about Disney characters' outlines, they're all like perfectly smooth, almost looks like a coloring book. And you know, that might work for your particular story. Taylor, I think that could work for your cat story. But I'd love to see you guys try to experiment with getting these tapered thick to thin lines. That's sort of one of the points of this, and that's what I grade the criteria on, is did you have an attempt at that? Okay. At least try it somewhere. You guys haven't said anything in a while. Everything still okay? Okay, Taylor, that's okay. So there's still things that you can do to get so that thick to thin line. I don't recommend bending your pen in order to do it. But one of the things you can do, let's see if I can find a good place for that. I'm going to work on this leg line right here. And I'll have to probably pick it up again. But I know that I want it to be a little thicker down in this valley where the line is coming in contact with the next piece of material there. So I'm just going to keep going over that line a little bit with the same pen. I'm still using that #1 pen. But it gets thinner out here. Then as I get in here, I'm thickening this line up with it. Okay. And I'll pick this up and hold it closer so you can see it. So I'm just sort of going over these lines several times to keep thickening it up. Okay. All right. So you can see here that that line is thicker and it gets thinner and it gets thicker again. And I did that with this Micron pen. So it can still be done. This means you got to go over the line a little bit. Do the same thing here now. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who was that?
Yeah, Caleb.
Oh, right on. I should have known by your deep voice. Yeah. I know, Caleb, you tend to work a little bit looser with your work. Has a lot of energy to it. This is a little
Thanks.
bit more tight and controlled.
All right.
So hopefully you can find like a middle ground and use both.
Yeah. I remember I need to refill my brush pens. They're all out of ink.
That's one of the nice things about brush pens, though, is you can refill them.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to track down a brush pen that my buddy Jason was using yesterday on a live stream. And it's a refillable brush tip pen for white. And he was making some really solid, smooth white lines with it.
Huh.
And so I want to get my hands on that, because that would be perfect for like areas like this where you just want to paint in some more white lines, something like that. Or if you shaded this whole thing with black and you're like, you know what, I want some highlights. You know, that's
Yeah,
great.
like I got a few like they're Posca markers. They got white gel in them, but you'd have to wait for the ink to dry because I've tried it a little bit too soon after I put the ink down and it just melts together and turns red.
Yep. That's usually the biggest challenge with white. One of the things that works really well in a pinch is to just grab a paintbrush, really small, same size brush I would use if I was inking, and then some white gouache. Because you can thin gouache with water, but it'll still lay down opaque.
Oh, okay.
So it'll lay down a thin, just basically a much thinner version of white, and then once it dries, you can ink right over it. I've actually had things like, you know, some of the gel pens or white, other types of white, where I've done some correction and then I go to ink over it and just blends and becomes gray and looks like crap. So
Yeah,
I'm always on the lookout for better whites.
Yeah, I got this little thing of white ink that I would sometimes dip my water brush pen into, so that if I need to, I can just squeeze it a little bit and it'll mix the ink with the water and make it a little bit more opaque.
Nice. So I wanted to point this out, guys. Again, we're looking at those lines there. I'm whipping this pen from pressing hard to pressing lightly to try and get those nice tapers. And that's, you know, if you ink all the time, you get really good at that. It's one of the reasons why I'm not really a professional inker, is that I jump back and forth between penciling pages and inking pages and doing digital coloring. To be a professional inker, you have to master these lines and sort of do this all day, every day. One guy that's really awesome at it that I met at a convention is Jonathan Glapion. I think his last name is French, but I don't think he's actually French. But he inked for like Greg Capullo on Batman on the first Court of Owls. If you remember that book, there's just some sick line art in it. but you can go check his work out. He's got some videos on YouTube where you can watch him inking, and it's just mind-boggling because he's doing it all with a brush, and he's making these long, smooth lines with like no wobble in them at all. And I'll be honest, I can't do that very well, but I know that's the goal, you know. It takes practice.
Right.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? I don't know how long we're going or how long we can go. I suppose we'll know when Taylor's like, it ended. Stop recording. It says it's 40 minutes at the top. I don't see that. Wow. So I find it interesting that it's still going if it's at 40 minutes. You always get cut off from class at 30. So real quick before we do get cut off, any last chance you would ask me any questions about inking?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Well, hopefully you guys are like doing something and not just staring at me. But I'm gonna keep on inking, and if Taylor's still recording, then we'll get quite a bit of it. Just keep in mind, Taylor, that the longer you record, the bigger that video is going to get. So. Taylor, do you have, whenever you say enough, I'll stop. Do you have like a Dropbox or something? Because the file's probably going to be, you know, maybe more than a gig, maybe a couple, especially at 40 minutes. So you'll want to upload it to something like that so it doesn't get condensed. You guys ever notice that when you take a video with your phone, then you send it to someone on like over Messenger, it looks like scheisse.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's condensing it. So after I'm done, you know, making all these little marks, you know, I'll probably go in and do some more of this hatching just to sort of start a directional light source. So already I can see that I've got light coming in from the top. This meeting will end in 10 minutes, it says. Okay, set your phone for 10 minutes. It's like we got 10 minutes left. I heard that this is not okay.
That's my
She just went.
So another thing I'm trying to do right now is trying to, some of this will get cleared up when I color it, but there's a leg here, and then there's like an opening in her costume that's showing sort of her upper stomach, lower rib area. But then right in there, there's a little gap of light. And I'm trying to make that as clear as possible between the two. So I'm gonna, first thing I'll do is sort of bold up the outline a bit more. And then, you know, make sure I put some shading on both sides of that white area to try and help it stand out a little bit. Okay, slowly getting there. It's looking a little bit better now. But back to this. I tend to jump all over the place. I don't know if you guys do the same thing. The only thing I try to stay consistent with is doing the things that are designed for the tool I'm using. So if I'm using the brush, I'm trying to hit all this stuff. But so normally I wouldn't be inking with a number 1, but because this is bent, this is laying down more like a 3 or even a 5. So that's why I'm using a 1. All right, so because there's texture lines here and texture lines here, I really want to make sure that this leg line is thicker so that it's an easy read. So again, I'm gonna go over those lines. Till they take me out to the edge of the leg. Then I'm gonna start going over those. And again, just to show you it can be done, I'm just using the Micron pen, going over them. With this one, I have the advantage of each little scale kind of creates one little mini line, so I don't have to worry about trying to like make this all one smooth line. Little cheat is the more details and texture you add, the less really long lines you have to draw. I have a great admiration for guys that can like, or gals that can like make these long smooth lines. You can see my arm kind of going back and forth so I can get the best angle.
That's Gamora, right?
It is Gamora, but it's Gamora wearing her original costume from the comics back in like, I want to say the 70s.
Oh,
That is what was requested.
okay.
I kind of like it. I tried to put a little bit of the face of the actress that played Gamora in there,
Oh,
just so there's some familiarity. But okay, so I have a little bit bolder separation line there between these two things. Another thing I might do now is, since this is kind of going into a valley, I'm going to start adding some hatching on this one, but then probably leave the top of this leg alone and just do hatching down here. So there's a nice separation of those, you know? Always trying to think about how one section can help the other section be seen better. Creating high contrast.
Less than 5 minutes.
Hey, thank you for that. All right, last chance for any other questions. Kind of cool that we got to go a little bit longer with this one. Not sure why. So I'm also even going to think a little bit about the way the muscles work. There's going to be a little valley right here, so I'm going to put just a bit more up the center of this to sort of insinuate that valley. All right, so you get something like that. Needs more over here though. See how I'm pulling towards me? It's the easiest direction to do that whip. I'm thicken up this line a bit. And I'm slowly just building them up. If you use a thicker pen, like a brush pen, obviously it doesn't take as long to build those lines up. Just takes a steadier hand. Okay, so you can see it's starting to get some form to it by the use of the texturing. All right, that seems like a good place to stop. So hopefully we got some good information on there for you guys. If you have any other questions, feel free to text message me or message me on the Zoom thing, okay?
All right.
All right, well, thanks for checking it out.
That was good.
Once I get the recording, I'll try to post it up on the D2L for anybody else. All right,
All right. Thank you.
you're welcome. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
All right. You too.
All right, bye-bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.